Darius Acuff is the most polarizing guard prospect in college basketball. Let's lock in and find out why.
You are Locked On NBA Draft with no ceilings. Your daily podcast on the future stars of the NBA. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome back to Locked On NBA Draft with no ceilings. Thank you as always for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5. And if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Head to FanDuel.com to get started today. As always, I'm Albert Gim, and I'm joined today with my co-host, our PhD in hoops and pizza making, Corey Tulaba. Corey, it's the end of the week. We're talking hoops. College basketball is getting closer and closer. Talk to us. How are you feeling? Any big plans? Just what's going on?
You know what? I'm very excited for the return of basketball. I mean, earlier this week, we had NBA Media Day. Nathan and I got our credential approved for the Champions Classic, which is exciting. So we're excited to go to that at Madison Square Garden, Duke versus Kansas, Michigan State versus Kentucky. It's going to be a great game in the future. So always fun to have stuff to look forward to. And when we start getting stuff like that, gets the juices flowing because it means the season is fast approaching. So very excited to talk hoops, very excited to talk about the prospect that we are covering today. Just excited overall to be alive, man.
I like that. Excited to be alive. Good perspective to have. Maybe we're getting older, Corey, and we think about those things more. But we're talking about a guy today, Darius Acuff Jr., right? And I'm sure you guys have heard this one before. We got to see him live at the Nike Hoop Summit. Another one that we saw at the Nike Hoop Summit. And I'm really excited to get into his game, Corey. I think when it comes to Darius Acuff, the reason why I'm excited for this conversation today is just because I have very conflicting opinions about his game. I waver by the minute on how I feel about his game. And that's why I'm so excited for college basketball to be back, because I want to see him play on the college level. Is kind of where I'm landing. But before we get into the nitty gritty of his offensive game, Corey, let's get into the lab with Professor Tulaba. Talk to us. Give us the essentials on Darius Acuff Jr.
Okay, so Darius Acuff is headed to Arkansas via IMG Academy. He finished 7th in ESPN's top 100. He was a McDonald's All-American. He played at the Nike Hoop Summit. He was, Jordan Brand Classic guy. So, high pedigree. He's listed on Arkansas's website at 6'3", 190. I've seen a rumored 6'5" to 6'6" wingspan. And I think the wingspan is going to be plus. It looked like he had good length. The 6'3", I'm a little bit more skeptical of. He was listed at 6'2" on the McDonald's and Jordan Classic roster. I bet he's probably closer to 6'1", but until we get official measurements at the combine, we'll go with what they're listed at with his college team. Now, he had stats for 14 games with IMG Academy per Synergy Sports. He averaged 25.4 points per game, 3.8 rebounds, 5.4 assists, 3.1 turnovers, good for a 1.74 assist turnover ratio, 1.1 steals, 0 blocks. Shot 43.4, 31.9, 75.3 shooting splits, 49.8 effective field goal, 54.1 true shooting, 20.7 shot attempts per game, 8.3 point attempts per game, 6.4 free throw attempts per game. This was a guy who played with the ball in his hands a lot.
That sounds like an understatement, Corey. A guy who played with the ball in his hands a lot and also let go of the ball out of his hands a lot into and around the basket, I think is a safe way to put it, Corey. I think if I kind of lay our foundation today, because we're about to get into his offense. Another guy, we had a great conversation on Wednesday, Corey, where we talked about Sean Abayev, right? Yeah. Who's heading to Cincinnati. And something we said about Sean was like, he's not shy. You gave us a beautiful rhyme. My guy is not shy. Corey Tulaba, Dr. Seuss. Darius Acuff is, I think, similar. Another guy who is not shy. Something I wrote here in my notes. has supreme belief in his abilities to put the ball in the basket is the first thing that I wrote. Another guy who has parking lot range, who is not shy to take it from anywhere on the court. He likes getting downhill to attack the rim. Just a very offensively minded player is how I want to kind of frame things with him. And to your point before, Corey, about his height, I'm 6'3" in shoes, and I'm 99% sure we were not the same height. So I'll leave it at that. I'm with you. I think he's a little bit shorter. I think he's going to be roughly around 6'1", 6'2" is kind of where I'm at. But it's okay. I mean, we're 6'1", 6'3", not a massive difference, but there is a difference. So did want to note that there. But Corey, if you can, get us into where you kind of landed with Darius Acuff's offensive game, because I think we're going to have a really interesting conversation about this side of the ball.
Yeah. So I did not like how he played at the McDonald's game and at the Nike Hoop Summit. I thought that he was very much shoot first. And, when you see guys in that environment over the course of a couple of weeks, a bunch of times, that could be cemented and you can anchor yourself to that belief. I don't think that's how he plays with his other teams. He has the ball in his hands. Obviously, he's very much a shoot first player, but there's a lot of nuance in how he operates. I never felt like he was playing selfishly when I watched in the games I watched, where in the All-Star circuit, it did feel a little selfish at times. And in that environment where you got all these other high level players, maybe you have to take a more selfish perspective into those games if you want to stand out in any way. And, he did play well in the Hoop Summit game. He definitely made an impact. What I'll say is, I think he is really skilled. I think he's high feel. Like, I think he probably has an argument to be one of the best passers in the freshman class, if not the best passer. Like, I thought he was a really good passer. I think he's probably the best lob passer in the class. He throws some ridiculous lobs, insane timing, perfect placement. When he's throwing hit ahead, he threw this hit ahead. I want to say it was against Columbus, but it might not have been, where he just threw the ball up the court and trusted his man would go and get it, like way ahead. And, he threw it with enough zip to get it ahead of the defense, but soft enough that when it bounced, it kind of slowed down. So some really nice stuff there. And then, like, in the half court, I think he showed some manipulative stuff where he'd take a couple of dribbles and hit the corner. It wasn't like live dribble stuff. And because he's a little shorter, he'd have to like two-hand, like throw it either overhead or kind of like across his body. But as a pick and roll operator, I really love the pace that he plays at. And I think he makes really intentional decisions to draw the defense and make them make a decision, even on like pretty simple kickouts. So because he's such a threat to get downhill and finish, like, guys will rotate and he'll kind of like play with them and manipulate them a little bit and act like he's really going to take a hard dribble to the paint. But play at a smooth enough pace that he makes kickouts and gives guys enough time to like get open, pass with enough zip that he can create shots. So I never felt like he was too selfish, even when he was scoring. I do think he can get a little ball stoppy. And I think that's how the offense was kind of designed for him to dominate usage and play like a more heliocentric brand of basketball. 21 shots a game in a high school game is a lot, especially for high level. But again, I never felt like, oh my God, he has another possession that he's dominating. I always felt like he was kind of just playing within the flow. I think as a shooter, he's a really good shot maker, comfortable shooting off the bounce, can create, like, shoot with a hand in his face. Took 109 pull-ups in those 14 games that Synergy had. Shot 31.2%, which is a pretty good number. Was 42% on catch and shoot shots. Hopefully he's shooting more of those at the next level. He's sharing a backcourt with a lot of guards that also play with the ball in their hands. But he shoots a high arcing ball. Like, dude, he kind of lit up Cam Boozer in the Columbus game. Like, got to the hoop, shot the ball, with confidence and knocked down shots in his face. He's got step backs, combo moves, and then he's a really good finisher. For a guy who we just said is like small, like he uses his length well. He's comfortable with both hands.
Strong.
And he is strong. He's not like yoked up, but like very cut up and very solid. 63.2% at the rim, 58.6 in the half court, 69% in transition, gets to the paint, whenever he wants. And he's not like a blur, like he's fast. He's got a quick first step, but he's never out of control. Good body control in midair. Not super bouncy, like only had one dunk in those 14 games and it was in transition. But like he's got a lot of interesting layers to his game. He's just small, like especially next to like a guy like a Caden Boozer. He looked tiny. So, but he's creative, he's skilled, he's polished. I don't know. I came out of the film a lot more optimistic about him as a talent and where he could be as a one and done than, maybe I thought I was going to be. I mean, obviously I knew he's highly touted, he's skilled, this and that, but I do think he's like, he's a silent assassin who's very skilled and just has a lot of layers to his game. I'm interested to see the fit because it's going to be that there's a lot of mouths to feed on that roster.
Wow. So Corey, I think you gave a very interesting perspective because for me, my notes are very different, and
I love
that. Think that's okay. Yeah, I think it's okay just because for me, I also wasn't thinking about so the frame that you put it in, right, with him being a little bit more nuanced with his passing. There are a couple things that you said that I really agree with. The lob passing with him is ridiculous. Like the lob that he threw to Cam Boozer in that Nike Hoop Summit game was literally inch perfect, like absolutely inch perfect. It was, if it was a little bit higher, I think it would have been too much, a little bit lower, and then Markovich would have hit it away. I thought it was really, really nice. And then even in the film outside of that, like you can see that he has great touch on the lobs, which for me, I don't know if there's a direct connection, but I feel like guys with good touch with the lobs also have like good touch overall, even as shooters. And so that was interesting for me. The questions that I had with him, Corey, were actually more like physical. And I would love your feedback, and if I'm wrong, please correct me, because something that I put here was that after watching his film, I can't really explain it, Corey, and maybe I'm just not at that level yet, but there were times where he felt kind of stiff to me. I don't know why. Like it didn't feel like he was, because, or maybe it's because for me mentally, like I've seen it so many places in the internet where he's getting comped to like Stephon Marbury, and I'm like, I don't know if he has like the same shift that Stephon Marbury had. Yeah.
So in my notes I have very creative handle to create separation, like very skilled ball handler, not super wiggly.
Okay.
But I think his handle is tight and deliberate. Like,
okay.
But he doesn't have like that. And like, I don't want to, step on our NBA player comps section too much, but Marbury is a name that I think deserves to be mentioned just play style wise. But Marbury definitely had more of that side to side New York shake.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I'm glad you said that, just because that was the biggest thing for me, where I was like, there was like a lack of bend, because like New York City point guards, it's like there's so much of that side to side wiggle that they have, but a lot of them is also because they can get so low to the ground and then they can shift their force either way just really, really quickly. And I felt like he didn't have that, but like I also felt like his like first step and his overall burst was just okay. Like it wasn't like super explosive, was what I felt. But to his credit, when he got downhill, the thing that I liked about him was that there was a strength and toughness that he played with. There were a couple buckets at the rim where he was really fighting and playing through contact to finish. And I was like, oh, this is really impressive to see from a guy who's in high school, where he's going in amongst the trees. We've already mentioned that he's not like a huge guy, but just really fighting to finish through. And I thought he deserves a lot of credit for that. But overall, Corey, like I think maybe this is like just my frame and the way that I viewed his game, and maybe I've got to do, and this is like just an initial first breakdown of his film. Maybe I've got to go back and look at it through a different frame, because I felt like he was very much like me first. And like the passing I thought was good, but once again, Like maybe I just have to do another
Well,
deep
look,
dive.
he's shoot first. Like, let's not get it twisted. And I don't
Sure.
think he doesn't play with like extreme burst, like with that first step burst. But I think he's really good at setting guys up and using it. Like he'll blow by guys with that first step. But I think it's controlled. Like I think he has other gears that he could get to.
Okay.
But he doesn't necessarily need to, because I think he's got good control with his pace. And I think it's weird to see it from a young player sometimes. But I don't think he's Westbrook. I don't think he's Derrick Rose as far as explosiveness goes. Like I don't think he's anything close to that. Right. But like Scoot also isn't as explosive as those guys, right? But I think Scoot's got like a good first step to get by guys. Yeah. So, maybe it's more in the vein, like that kind of vein. Okay. And yes, he's looking for his shot, but I think that he leverages his scoring to make plays for guys. Sure. I think. But his first read is definitely to score. And look, for a guy who does have the ball in his hands as much as he had a 11.6 turnover percentage. Like he takes care of the ball. Like whether the shot's going up or he's making a play, like he's probably making a pretty decent decision with the ball. So I'm conflicted with him because he's small. And it's not necessarily my personal opinion. I just know what the NBA feels about smaller guards. Yeah. But I thought that there was enough to like there to go, he could be an exception to the rule.
And to your earlier point, Corey, I think it's going to be really fascinating to see what this looks like on the team that he's on, in the context that he's in, because will he be given the opportunities to kind of show off the stuff that you're talking about, right? Is he in the right context to really accentuate some of those skills? We're not sure, right? But overall, Corey, I think where we are landing, both of us, is that he's a very talented offensive player. Now, how this progresses and what this looks like as he continues to progress, I think is going to be interesting and going to be something to monitor. But he's also got another side of his game, and that's on the defensive side of the ball. And we're going to get right into that after this break. The truth is, Corey and I, we're young dads in our 30s, and we got a lot to think about when it comes to our finances. And most people can't name all their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why we've got Monarch Money. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or your phone. Monarch Money is built for people with busy lives. If you've put off organizing your finances, Monarch is for you. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel like you're in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. As I mentioned, Corey and I were young dads, and we've got different investments, and we got money streams coming from here and there, and we want to kind of figure this out with keeping our families in mind and our ambitions in mind and setting up our kids for the future, our family for the future. There's so much going on, and having a tool like Monarch Money to help us kind of organize all that and just be of assistance to us with all the different things going on in our lives, it's an invaluable tool. So if you're like us, don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. 50% off is pretty good. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNBA. All right, Corey, we're going to get into the defensive side of the ball of Darius Acuff. And Corey, when it comes to the defensive side of the ball, with a lot of these guys that we're talking about, for me, defense is not his marquee skill. Okay, I want to start there. I will be very clear. I was not the biggest fan of his defense, is I think the fairest and nicest way I'm going to put it. But look, Corey, I would love to hear your thoughts. But Corey, before I send it over to you, there are a couple things that I did want to note. Okay. So on this side of the ball, there were times that I thought he did a good job of using his strength. Okay. He's got a big chest, good frame. We've talked about that already. He does a good job of doing that. But I did feel like here, from what I watched, at times there was an effort issue or maybe an intensity issue where I felt like there were times where I don't want to use the word floating because I don't think floating is necessarily the accurate way to describe what's happening here. Maybe it's the offensive end of the floor where he was just demanded to do so much. We already talked about his heavy workload on that side of the ball, but there were just times where like I would watch long possessions where he's just never in a stance. He was just upright the whole time, just moving around. It didn't feel like he was fully, it almost felt like he was recharging. Is kind of how I want to put it. There were a couple times where I think they were playing Wasatch. It was either Wasatch or they were playing somebody else, but he was like in the strong side corner and like the ball handler is literally coming down the lane in front of him. And it was like a weird possession where he doesn't tag or he doesn't show, doesn't stunt. And he just kind of stared at the ball handler coming down the lane and didn't move a muscle. And it felt like he was just like a mannequin there. And I was like, oh, I don't like this possession very much. But at the same time, I do want to give him credit. Like he wasn't like that all the time, but there were times where you could feel like he was just kind of recharging on this end of the floor. Maybe I'm wrong, Corey. Give us your thoughts on the defensive side of the ball because I didn't walk away very impressed.
Yeah, I mean, in my note, what feels like he would use defense to rest from carrying a big offensive load is like that was the last kind of note that I put down. I think the big thing is he's just not an aggressive defender. Is what it is. I wish he was more aggressive, really, really like as a guard, when we talked about Sean earlier in the week, we said like when you're 6'8", there's a little bit more leeway as a defender that you can have. When you're a little smaller, you have to be pesky. You have to be annoying. You have to be able to get up into guys and be disruptive and guard at the point of attack. He doesn't have a lot of positional versatility. Because of his size, he's really going to be a one position player. Maybe he plays with a taller initiator, in the NBA and he can kind of show his versatility offensively by playing off of somebody like that as well. But defensively, he doesn't really have a ton of defensive versatility because, he is at a size disadvantage. It feels like he's at a size disadvantage when he's out there. I think he has tools. He's strong. Like you said, he could absorb contact. I think when he's contesting, his length could bother guys. One of my big critiques was if he has plus length, he should use it more often because he would guard with his hands like at his hips.
Yeah.
Like he wouldn't like get low and wide.
Yeah.
I think he moves laterally fine. I even think he's a pretty good screen navigator. When he gets hit, he does get stuck sometimes, but I think he's good at like stepping up and over early. When anybody gets hit with a good screen, you'll struggle to get around it, but especially, when you're a little bit smaller, but I do think he can get slithery. Sometimes he gambles, which but it really just felt like hey, like you said, I'm recharging the batteries. I carry such a heavy load. And it isn't as if the other guys, like I thought he played with like pretty interesting players offensively. So it did feel like, maybe he didn't need to carry the load that he did and he could offer a little bit more defensively. I'm going to be really interested to see what he could do on that end of the floor. Like Boogie Flan last year was a guy who was guarding at the point of attack. So, is he going to be able to kind of take that on and kind of be that pesky, right in your grill, in your shirt, you could like smell me kind of defender. That's what I want to see from him. Otherwise, what he showed at IMG is I don't think it's particularly interesting. He didn't block shots. I thought as a low man, he was very much not a deterrence as a helper. He wasn't really like super good at creating defensive events, even, with steals. I think a little over one steal, like 1.1 steals per game, I think it was. So, he's got work to do defensively. And I want to see if he steps up and takes that on because he's going to play with other talented guys. He's going to play with other guys that play with the ball in their hands. So he's not going to have that same excuse as he did at IMG.
No, absolutely, Corey. I think, to be honest, there's a lot more that I would like to say, but we're actually running a little short on time here, surprisingly. But I'll just wrap here by saying, Corey, like I think defensively, if he's playing in a different role and asked to do not as much, maybe he's going to be able to show a little bit more on this side of the ball than we saw in high school. And so I'm excited to see his growth on this end as well. And with that in mind, with his offense and defense, there's some interesting guys that we'll get into for comps right after the break. We are a month into the NFL season, and FanDuel has an offer that you don't want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if you win, get $300 in bonus bets to use across the platform, across the app. It's a perfect time for you to kind of unlock that and to tap into that. And right now, it's a weekend. We're just coming off of Thursday Night Football. We have an exciting slate. We've got Broncos and Eagles. I think it's a really exciting game. The Eagles remain undefeated, and the Broncos are coming off an easy win on Monday night. It's a short week for them, but the Eagles are currently favored by 4.5 at home. And maybe the Broncos can pull off the upset on the road and give the Eagles their first loss of the season. Maybe Bo Nix is feeling himself. He's connecting with Cortland Sutton again. They're establishing the run with J.K. Dobbins and R.J. Harvey. It can be really interesting. And the second game that I wanted to add here, Chiefs and Jaguars, I think is suddenly a very interesting game. Mahomes and company, they look good this weekend with Xavier Worthy back, but the Jaguars are frisky. Their defense is good. They're running the ball real well with Etienne and Tootin. I think that's a really interesting team, and maybe, on the road, well, actually, no, at home, they provide to be a tougher test for the Chiefs than they're expecting. But overall, don't wait. Get into it. Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started now. All right, Corey, we're getting into our comps. This is an interesting one. I have weird ones. I really struggled. And Corey, before we get into your comps, I do want to say this. Because of how, and I've been feeling this recently, whenever I have like a really hard time finding a comp for a player, that makes me worried about that player's outlook in the NBA. And that's something like I've really been thinking about a lot. And I don't say this to be negative about Darius Acuff. I'm going to be that intrigued to see what his season looks like in college basketball this year, because I really want to see it. I have some critiques about him for both ends of the floor, but I'm not making the definitive statement that he's not going to be a good player. But me having trouble finding comps put me in a darker place with him. I was a little bit worried. But anyway, Corey, I'll send it to you. What are some of your comps for Darius Acuff Jr.?
All right. So, I mentioned Stephon Marbury, right? Stephon Marbury. You mentioned it. And then, I kind of piggybacked off that. I think there is some stylistic similarities there. But as you said, not as shifty, probably not as explosive. Young Steph was pretty explosive as well. But similarly, like dominated usage, he was the 20 and 8 guy, but it was like, does that contribute to winning? Like over the long haul, like there was a ceiling if he was your best player offensively. Some NBA guys though that I thought of, Cole Anthony, like I think he could maybe play like a role like that, like where, all right, he's going to come off your bench. He could be a lightning rod. Maybe he could step in as a starter. This is more of like maybe like a mid-tier outcome, potentially lower end if you are a big believer. Cole Anthony, if you remember him in high school, he was a guy who had a lot of juice coming into that draft as well. So maybe there's an outcome like that. And Cole Anthony went, 15th in that draft? So, just outside the lottery. So I think ultimately, like, he could probably end up in the same spot. I think maybe there's some stylistic stuff offensively that you can kind of look at a guy like Andrew Nembhard.
Okay.
Nembhard's probably a little bit taller, right? But Nembhard is a guy who's really, really tough to guard, can really score the rock. He can make plays, right? And if he defends, like, I think Nembhard can defend. Maybe there's that kind of outcome. And then smaller guard, older, maybe there's like a Mike Conley outcome, potentially. Maybe not prime Mike Conley. I don't know if a team, like, I feel like the NBA has shifted away from that kind of player, but you look at the impact that Conley had just being a calming presence who could score the ball, at his peak, really good playmaker, but he was a real pest defensively, and that's kind of the theme that we need to see change. But from an offensive perspective, maybe a guy like Mike Conley who can really run the show and play off guys. Conley, played with the ball in his hands as a true point guard, but then also he's really scaled his game back as he's got older and still been able to be effective, with the Jazz and with the Timberwolves. So maybe those are kind of some names of guys he could study, going forward.
Okay. No, I like all those, Corey. As I mentioned, mine are not as up there as yours, but that's a me thing, right? That's just where I'm at with his evaluation. My higher end comp for him is a guy that's near and dear to your heart, Kobe White.
Okay.
Wondering if he could be that type of player offensively. But then that's also like you really believing in the shooting with him and stuff like that. If you don't believe in Acuff as a shooter, this is the lowest of comps, Corey. I don't think it gets lower than this, and people are going to think it's harsh, but I just put it there as like a data point for me. Right. I think if everything goes wrong, he could be Emmanuel Mudiay is where my brain went. If everything goes wrong.
Yeah, no, that's an outcome.
Okay. And I think that's the lowest outcome, but I think a very fair outcome for him could be a Kobe White type of player, a guy who in the NBA is an offensive spark who can go up there and put up 35 points in a game and you don't bat an eye because he's that type of dynamic offensive talent. So that's where I landed, Corey. And I think overall where we're landing with Darius Acuff, there's a lot of talent and there's a lot that he can be as an offensive player and even defensive player, but we're going to have to see it. And monitoring his game in college basketball this year is going to be a lot of fun. But as always, guys, as we're wrapping here, we want to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Thanks for rocking with us. We'll see you guys next week. My name's Albert. He's Corey. Thanks for rocking with us.